Have you ever been treated like you don't belong, even when all you wanted was a quiet dinner with your family? That's exactly what happened to Marcus Johnson on a Friday night he would never forget. The sky outside was painted in orange and gold as Marcus drove through downtown, smiling at little Lily in the backseat. She had just received her Best Student of the Month certificate, and the family wanted to celebrate at Green's Diner, one of the most popular spots in town. Marcus had heard it was a bit fancy, but tonight felt special. He wanted his daughter to remember it forever. As they entered, the smell of roasted chicken and baked bread filled the air. Angela smiled, holding Lily's hand, but the moment they stepped in, the chatter inside fell silent. Eyes turned. Forks stopped moving. Behind the counter stood Walter Green, the owner himself, a tall man in his 50s with cold blue eyes. His smile vanished when he saw them. Marcus felt the shift in the room, the heavy silence pressing on his chest. Still, he walked to the front desk and said politely, "Table for 3, please." Walter didn't move. He just looked them up and down before saying slowly, "We are full tonight." Marcus glanced around. Half the tables were empty. Angela whispered, "Maybe we should just leave," but Marcus stood his ground. "We made a reservation online," he said calmly. Walter smirked. "Maybe you did, maybe you didn't, but this place has a dress code, and we expect our guests to look a certain way." His tone made the meaning clear. Lily tugged her dad's hand, confused. "Daddy, why is he being mean?" Marcus knelt beside her, his voice trembling slightly. "It's okay, sweetheart." He turned back to Walter. "Sir, we just want to celebrate my daughter's big day. We'll be quiet, we'll be respectful, please." But Walter's voice rose. "I said no, now leave before I call security." The diners whispered, some looking uncomfortable, others pretending not to see. Angela felt tears forming. She whispered, "Let's go, Marcus." But just as they turned to leave, a man sitting in the corner slowly stood up, a man no one had noticed before. He looked directly at Walter, his expression unreadable. Marcus caught his eyes for a second and felt a strange mix of power and calm. Walter's face went pale when he saw him. Whoever that man was, he wasn't just an ordinary customer. Marcus didn't know it yet, but this was only the beginning of a night that would change everything for his family and for the man who just humiliated them. Before we continue this story, take a moment to subscribe. Because every story here reminds the world that humanity still matters, and silence helps know when the restaurant fell silent as the man in the corner stood up. His presence carried a quiet authority that made everyone stop talking. He was dressed in a dark gray suit, calm but serious, with eyes that had seen a lot. Walter Green, the owner, suddenly looked uneasy, like a child caught doing something wrong. The man spoke, his voice low but firm. "Mr. Green," he said, "is this how you treat paying customers?" Marcus froze. Everyone turned to look at the man. Angela held Lily close, unsure what was happening. Walter stammered, "Yes, sir, this is just a misunderstanding." But the man wasn't convinced. He slowly walked toward the Johnson family and said softly, "Sir, ma'am, I'm sorry you had to go through this. Please have a seat at my table." His kindness was like a small light in a dark room. Marcus hesitated. "That's kind of you," he said, "but we don't want any trouble." The man smiled gently. "Sometimes trouble finds us even when we do nothing wrong. Sit, please." Reluctantly, the family sat at his table. Walter's face tightened with anger, but he said nothing. Angela tried to comfort Lily, who looked up and asked innocently, "Mommy, why didn't that man want us here?" Angela didn't know how to answer. Marcus took her hand and whispered, "Because some people can't see past the color of our skin. But you hold your head high, okay?" Meanwhile, the man turned to Walter. "You might want to bring them a menu now," he said calmly. "I'll be covering their meal." Walter forced a smile and said, "Of course, sir." His hands shook as he walked back to the counter. Marcus leaned closer and asked quietly, "Thank you, sir, but may I ask who you are?" The man smiled, almost amused. "You'll find out soon enough," he said. "Let's just say I have a personal interest in how this place treats people." Dinner continued in tense silence. A few other customers began whispering, some glancing with guilt at the Johnsons. Angela felt tears build up again, but this time they weren't from shame. They were from pride in her husband, in her daughter, in the man who stood up for them when no one else did. Halfway through their meal, a police car pulled up outside. Walter's assistant whispered something to him nervously. Marcus noticed Walter's eyes flicker toward the man in the suit, who seemed completely calm. The door opened, and Officer Miller stepped in. He walked straight toward the man in the gray suit, nodded respectfully, and said, "Good evening, Mayor." The whole restaurant went still. The racist owner's face drained of color. The man who had stood up for the Johnson family was the mayor of the city. Marcus blinked in disbelief. The mayor turned toward Walter and said, "Mr. Green, I think we need to have a conversation about how you run your business." The room filled with whispers and fear. But Marcus didn't speak. He just held his daughter's hand tighter, realizing this night wasn't over yet. Before we move to the next chapter, please subscribe, because every story here isn't just about racism, it's about standing up when it matters most. The word mayor echoed through the restaurant like thunder. Forks clattered, chairs squeaked, and everyone's eyes darted between the mayor and Walter Green. For the first time that night, the man who had shouted with such confidence now stood frozen, his lips trembling. "Mayor Thompson," Walter stuttered, forcing a nervous smile. "I didn't recognize you, sir." "If I had known," the mayor cut him off sharply. "If you had known," his voice grew harder. "Would that have changed how you treated this family?" The entire diner fell quiet. Even the sound of the rain outside stopped mattering. Walter's throat tightened. He opened his mouth, but no words came. Marcus sat still, his arm around Lily, who was watching everything with wide, innocent eyes. "Daddy," she whispered. "Is he in trouble?" Marcus replied softly. "Sometimes people only learn when someone finally stands up to them." The mayor turned to Marcus and said, "Sir, you and your family were treated with disrespect, and I'm truly sorry. No one deserves that, especially not in this city." His tone softened for a moment before hardening again. He looked back at Walter. "Do you know what the sign outside says, Mr. Green? It says, 'Everyone welcome.' But clearly you didn't mean that." Walter's assistant tried to interrupt, but the mayor raised his hand. "Not another word. I've received complaints before, but tonight I saw it myself. You've embarrassed this city and everything it stands for." His voice grew firm again. "Tomorrow morning, the Health and Business Department will be visiting this diner. You'll be explaining your policies to them and to the press." Gasps spread through the room. A few customers clapped quietly, others bowed their heads in shame. Walter's face turned red. "Please, Mayor Thompson, I didn't mean any harm. It was just a misunderstanding." But the mayor's eyes showed no mercy. "The harm is done, Mr. Green. You judged this family by the color of their skin in front of your staff, your customers, and your conscience. Maybe it's time you learn what that feels like." Marcus stood up slowly. His heart was racing, but his voice was steady. "Sir," he said to the mayor, "thank you for standing up for us." "You didn't have to." The mayor looked at him and replied, "I did, because silence helps racism breathe, and I refuse to let that happen under my watch." Angela took Lily's hand as they prepared to leave. But before they stepped out, the mayor called after them. "Mr. Johnson," he said gently, "next week there's a city event honoring community heroes. I'd like your family to be my guest." Marcus froze. He didn't expect kindness after so much hate. He nodded slowly. "We'll be there." As they walked out into the rain, Angela whispered, "Maybe some people do care." Marcus looked up at the sky and said quietly, "Maybe it's finally time they did." Inside, Walter sank into a chair, shaking, as Officer Miller approached him with cold eyes. "You really picked the wrong night to show your true colors," the officer muttered. "Before we reveal what happens next, take a moment to subscribe. Because every story reminds us one voice can make a difference, and silence only protects the wrong side." The next morning, news cameras surrounded Green's diner. Reporters crowded the sidewalk as the story spread like wildfire. "Mayor witnesses racism in local restaurant." The headline flashed on every screen. People who had once eaten at the diner now stood outside with protest signs reading, "Equality isn't optional," and "Stop racism in our city." Inside, Walter Green sat in his office, pale and defeated. He had spent the night trying to reach his lawyer, but the calls didn't help. His phone buzzed endlessly, angry messages, cancelled reservations, suppliers cutting ties. He had built his restaurant on arrogance and hate, and now it was all collapsing. For the first time in years, he felt powerless. Across town, Marcus, Angela, and Lily were getting ready for school and work. Marcus turned on the TV just as a reporter said, "The mayor has announced new anti-discrimination measures for all city businesses." Angela smiled softly. "You see," she said, "what they meant for harm turned into something good." Marcus nodded, his eyes reflecting both pain and pride. Later that week, the mayor's office held a public event at City Hall. The hall was filled with people, journalists, business owners, students, and community members. At the front sat the Johnson family, looking humble but proud. Mayor Thompson took the stage. "A week ago," he began, "I witnessed something I wish I hadn't. A man denied a family their dignity, but what stood out wasn't the hate, it was the grace with which that family responded." He looked toward Marcus and smiled. "Mr. Johnson reminded us that silence is dangerous, that standing up, even when your voice shakes, matters." The audience clapped, some wiping tears. Lily hid her face shyly against her mother's arm as cameras flashed. Then the mayor turned serious again. "Walter Green's restaurant has been shut down for investigation, and every business in this city will now face new rules to ensure no one is ever treated that way again." His voice echoed through the hall. After the ceremony, Marcus walked outside with his family. Reporters surrounded him, asking, "How does it feel to see justice served?" Marcus paused for a moment, looking out at the bright afternoon sky. "It's not about justice for me," he said quietly. "It's about my daughter growing up in a world where she doesn't have to prove she deserves respect. That's all I ever wanted." Lily looked up at him with her wide eyes and said, "Daddy, are people going to be nice now?" Marcus smiled softly. "Maybe not all of them, baby, but maybe enough to start changing things." As they walked away, the crowd behind them cheered, chanting, "Equality for all." The mayor watched from the steps, his heart heavy but hopeful. For one small family, the world had shifted, not completely, but enough to remind everyone watching that humanity isn't dead. It just needs courage to stand again. Before you go, please subscribe. Because every time you do, you help stories like this reach someone who needs to believe that change is still possible, that stained humanity can heal.